This week, my guest is Sami Awad from the Holy Land Trust. I sat down with him and I asked him, what is the Holy Land Trust?
Well, the Holy Land Trust is a Palestinian nonprofit organization that was started in Bethlehem 10 years ago. Our mission and our goal is to strengthen the community for the future. And we work with the Palestinian community in developing means and ways to deal with the difficulties that the Palestinian community faces, internally and externally. And we address real challenges that face the Palestinian community, but try to address them in a way that bring hope to the Palestinian community and will eventually bring a more positive result in how we deal with Israeli society to achieve what we all seek here is a real sense of peaceful coexistence and equality in this Holy Land. The three main challenges that we work on and address are the following. The first one is the occupation. Of course, as Palestinians, we are living under occupation, and nobody in the world can deny that fact. Even Israelis do not deny the fact that we are living under a military occupation in the occupied territories. So the question for us is, how do we keep the Palestinian community resilient, steadfast, and resisting of this occupation, as I said, in ways that will lead to positive change for the future. The second challenge is the challenge of what comes after the occupation ends. Many people just say, end the occupation, and as if peace will prevail in the Holy Land. And what we know is that ending the occupation is one thing, but for Palestinians to develop a democratic state where there is respect for human rights, equality among gender, freedom of expression, economic sustainability, all of this needs to be worked on, even at this time where we are living under occupation. So what can we do at this stage where we can build a future community that has the principles that we are seeking as a Palestinian community? The third challenge is what we call the global challenge, which is how can we make people aware of what is happening today in the situation, and not just to create awareness, but to also create advocacy. We want people in the West to be aware of the difficulties that are facing Palestinians and Israelis, and at the same time to go beyond awareness, to do something about pressuring their governments and pushing for peace in this part of the world. The premise of our work is in nonviolence. As an organization, we are committed to nonviolence, both as a principled way of life and a way of dealing with conflicts, and at the same time, nonviolence for us is a strategy to dealing with the difficulties that we face. So as an organization, we conduct workshops, trainings, seminars in nonviolence within the Palestinian community, engage in actions and activities that are directly linked with engaging in nonviolence to resist the occupation or resist settlement expansion on Palestinian land, and also building nonviolence as a community way of life. Because again, it's not just ending the occupation that's important, it's what comes after the occupation ends that is as important for us.
Do you feel that religion is a major part of the problem that happens here in the Middle East?
Well, I see religion as being an excuse and justification for certain political agendas, and that religion in its core and in its heart is not the problem. So there are people that misuse religion, there are people that abuse religion in order to achieve their political goals. I can say on the Palestinian side that the greatest majority of Palestinians actually do not use religion as an excuse for achieving a political goal or agenda. I deal and interact with Palestinians on a continuous basis, and very, very few. There are, of course, groups that do use religion, like some of the Muslim groups, but the greatest majority, I would say over 70-80% of the Palestinians see this as a political struggle for liberation. What we are doing is to attain our basic human rights and dignity in achieving an independent Palestinian state. But there are groups, as I said, that do use religion, and they see religion as their goal, as their ultimate goal.
Now you say creating a separate Palestinian state. Do you think if there was a Palestinian state there would still be peace, or because we have groups like Hamas who still want to destroy Israel, so could there still be peace after that's created, or would it be a problem still?
Well, for me, the premise of any political solution is actually not the border political solution. So yes, according to international law and UN resolutions and even the way the world is moving, they are looking for the two-state solution. But having two states, I agree, will not necessarily achieve peace. And this is where what we are doing as an organization is trying to find the core value that is needed to achieve real peace in the Holy Land. And that core value is based on the recognition of the equal right of the other to be on this land. And so far, I have to say that in all the negotiations that have happened, there has never been this issue of equality being discussed as a core value, that Palestinians and Israelis who live in this land have both equal right and they have both equal responsibility towards the other to be here. And I say that once we're able to reach the sense of recognizing equality, then from there any political solution is the right solution. So then we could talk about the one-state solution. Then we could talk about the two-state solution. We could talk about a 10-state solution. But at least we have this core value that equality is the foundation. So far, even in negotiations, we've seen negotiations not done on an equal level between Israelis and Palestinians, where decisions are pretty much made and enforced on the other, and there's always a threat in the relationship, even in negotiations between one party and the other. We have not seen a recognition of the injustice that was done towards the other, because that recognition is also a declaration of equality. We have done you wrong. The Israelis need to say this to the Palestinians. The Palestinians need to say, we also recognize the injustice that has happened to you as a Jewish community in Europe. We cannot also cut ourselves from that reality that has happened to you. And in our recognition of your equality, we say you are welcome to be on this land. This is for example. So it really starts with equality. Then the political solution will be the right solution that comes after that.
Now, I've been in the land for quite a number of years, and sometimes I get the impression that Israeli Arabs feel like second-class citizens, and of course Palestinians have a harder time. Do you think that's true?
Well, it is true. It is very clear that when we do talk about the issue of equality, it is also the recognition of equality among different ethnic groups and religious groups within your own society. So, for example, when we talk about the Palestinians who live inside what is called the Green Line, or Israeli Arabs that live inside Israel, you will clearly see the greatest majority of Arabs who live in Israel declare to you that we are treated as second or third class citizens in this government that shows preferential treatment to anybody who comes from Jewish background or Jewish ancestry and not from a Christian or Muslim Arab background. As Palestinians who live inside the occupied territories, we also see this even reflected more, because now we're under military control and military rule, so we're not even participating in a democratic process within the decision-making body of the State of Israel. We're just receiving military orders that pretty much control and conduct our lives on a daily basis. So equality in that sense really means at that level as well, that in the sense there isn't really no Jew nor Gentile in the whole land. We're all equal, we're all the same, we all respect each other, we all have a love of God, and we all practice our faith in different ways, and we will respect the other in that. And I think this is what the Holy Land should be.
Now, Israel built a wall, and they say it was for security, to stop suicide bombers getting into places like Jerusalem. How does the Palestinian feel about the wall? Do they feel it's corporate punishment because they're kept in like one big prison?
Well, the problem is not it's one big prison. It's many small prisons that have been created by the building of the wall. And again, for me, the wall is a symbol of a history that has led to this. So the wall was not just built it did not start just by pouring cement in one area in one day and saying this is the wall is beginning now. We need to be able to understand and analyze the history behind this, and to be able, for us even as Palestinians, which is very difficult to do, is to understand the reasoning and justifications for the building of the wall on the Israeli side, not in terms of what Palestinians do in terms of the attacks that happen against Israeli civilians, but what led to the creation of this psyche of fear within Israeli society, where the whole identity of the Jewish community becomes linked with a person committing a suicide attack. And again, for us as Palestinians, this has to take us back even into learning and understanding what the Holocaust, for example, did to the Jewish society in Europe, and that fear that has been built within the Israeli community, a fear that we cannot deny. It is there. We could make arguments how real or unreal it is, but a fear is a fear. And if a community is fearing for its existence, we have to be able to recognize and deal with this fear. So the wall goes back even that far back for me. When Israel was, for example, declared as a state in 1948, the wall was built at that time. So now we are seeing a type of implementation of the wall, but there has been many types of the building of the wall since 1948 up until this point. And again, it goes back to this need to achieve equality on this land, that we're all equal. This cannot be a land for the Jews only. And it cannot be a land for the Muslims only, and it cannot be a land for the Christians only. The holiness of this land is in the culture of having all of these religions be able to practice and worship God on this land. The wall now has turned into a concrete wall, so it went from maybe a religious identity to a moral value to a psychological fear. Now it's become a physical body that we are witnessing and seeing and suffering from as a Palestinian community. Bethlehem, for example, where we are now, is almost completely now surrounded by either the concrete wall or the fences in some areas, which is, it's not just now and cannot be seen only as a security issue for the state of Israel or for the Jewish people, but for us as Palestinians, we are seeing it as a mechanism of strangling the Palestinians, because the wall controls us politically, it controls us economically, demographically, in terms of expansion for the future and building. Everything in our lives now is controlled by this wall that has being built around us. And the big issue that we see is that this wall will eventually end up even squeezing us out of even our cities, the Palestinian cities where we are now, and lead to the destruction of the Palestinian existence in this Holy Land.
Do you feel that Israelis demonize Palestinians and Palestinians demonize Israelis?
Well, I think it is mutual. I think that there is problems on both the Palestinian and Israeli side in trying to demonize and stereotype and dehumanize the other in order to justify their acts against the other. And this is, of course, again deals with this issue of how do we see the other side? Do we see the other as a human being who is seeking their rights, their responsibilities, to be recognized as a human, to be recognized as a community, as a people, by me first and then by the international community? Or do we see just the tanks and the violence and the soldiers and the colonial system that exists? One thing that definitely is happening in this separation that has been created over the last, especially over the last, maybe we could say 20 years now, is that this separation becomes now an excuse for extremists on both sides to start creating these big labels on the other, and then justify their actions by saying that all Israelis are like this or all Palestinians are like this, and building on this mentality of fear. And this fear is the cause of demonizing that happens toward the other. If you fear the other side, then you become justified in doing everything possible to not just protect yourself, but to actually destroy the other before they destroy you. The wall is a symbol of that. The wall has really been a mechanism to separate Palestinians and Israelis from having these very important interactions, these human level interactions where they're able to see the humanity of the other side and are able to learn and understand of the fears that exist on the other side. Now we don't have that, which will make Bashan even much worse than what it is.
So what programs do you run here to try and change the situation in the land?
Well, for us, what we are doing and when we engage in nonviolence, nonviolence for us is a key strategy in bringing down all of the barriers and all of the walls that have been created over the years. For us, nonviolence eliminates the excuse and the justification by certain Israeli groups, leaders, military apparatus in Israel that has an agenda that for me is an agenda that does not fit with the voice of the greatest majority of Israelis, which is the greatest majority for me is a people that want peace and want to really end the conflict with Palestinians. But for us, what we need to do as Palestinians, and this is where nonviolence becomes very powerful for us, is to address the real issues that face the Israeli society. And we need the Israeli society to see a Palestinian movement that seeks its rights, seeks its human dignity, seeks international law to be implemented in this land, and at the same time recognize that these Palestinians are not out to destroy, are not out to kill, are not out to eliminate the existence of the Jewish community. We need an Israeli society that is able to rise up and say, we will no longer be involved in oppressing another people, and we cannot any longer buy the excuses and justifications of our leaders in telling us why we have to suppress another people. So if we engage in nonviolence, their lives are not threatened, for example. So they cannot say we have to build this wall anymore because we are threatened by the Palestinians. And again, nonviolence creates an opportunity where for Palestinians are able to express their frustration, their anger, and their fear as well in ways that are productive. So nonviolence is for us the key value. Also creating international awareness becomes very important. Many people in the world simply and truly do not know what's going on, and they fall into the traps of the arguments that are made on both sides. And for many people in the West, both arguments make sense to them. So when both arguments are making sense or both arguments are not making sense, then they just throw this issue away and they say, no, we want to deal with something else, something that is easier for us to deal with. So we need to make the story clear to the international community as to what's really happening here, that this is not an issue of one people being good and one people being bad. There is good and bad on both sides, and there are people who want peace on both sides and people who do not want peace on both sides. And we need people to be aware of what is really happening here and how to raise their voices to push their governments, where sadly to say many who are part of the international global system are in a sense not interested in having peace be in the Holy Land or in the Middle East, because there are also many economic and military interests for many of these nations that having war and violence fits into their game plan.
Now, Sami, many times children come out on the streets and throw stones at the Israeli soldiers. How do you work with the children and youth and deal with their frustrations?
Well, children are a real concern, and the trauma that children live on a daily basis, and the trauma does not necessarily have to be by them having felt the violence directly. I mean, I will relate, for example, with my 5-year-old daughter. I have a 5-year-old daughter who is witnessing this violence on a continuous basis. She sees the soldiers come in, for example, in their army jeeps. She sees television. She hears the discussions that take place in our house with our neighbors about what is happening in Gaza. So maybe physically she's not directly involved, but even at a 5-year-old child who we try to really create this environment where she's able to grow up in this character of peace and nonviolence, she is even making these comments towards the other, of reflecting negatively, let's say, towards the other, and having negative opinions towards the other. And for her, as I said, she's in a safe haven. Many of these other children are not. Many of them are witnessing this violence in a direct way. We have programs at the organization that deal with this issue in a very particular way. One program is called Peace Builders, which focuses on a program. We work with schools to build the character of the child to be a character of nonviolence, to be able to take all of this anger that the child has and the fear that the child grows up in and really reflect it in positive ways within the community. Another program we have is called Remember the Innocents, which is a program that aims more on the teenage level, teenagers, that is based on a story that happened in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, the story of the massacre of the innocent children. So we formed a club for the children in Bethlehem, where they come in, these teenagers come in, and we give them trainings, and we empower them, and we give them the tools to be able also to reflect their frustration in productive and positive ways. But these are small programs compared to the big issues that we are facing, which is a traumatized group of children that in half a generation will be the leaders of the Palestinian community. And if we are not able to really deal with their issues and their concerns, and if Israeli society is not able to understand this trauma and violence that is being born in these children, then again we will fall in the next generation. Yes, we might have a quiet time for maybe 10 years, but we'll have a generation that will reflect even more violently towards the other if we're not able to address this issue.
Now, you have a travel encounter program. What do you do there with that program?
The Travel and Encounter program is a program that addresses the issue of how do we create awareness as to what is happening here. And this program, what it encourages and what it says is that the best way to understand the conflict in the Middle East and the occupation and what is happening to the Palestinians and what is also happening to the Israelis is not by reading 100 books and not by watching 20 documentaries, but it is by you coming here. So the Travel and Encounter functions as a tour operator that encourages people from around the world, especially from the West, to organize themselves in groups and come here, experience the Holy Land of the past. Many people want to see the religious sites, of course, where Jesus walked and was, and where he was born and where he was crucified. But at the same time, as you experience the Holy Land of the past, also experience the Holy Land of the present, and see what you could do for the future of the Holy Land and for peace in this region. So the travel program is a tour program where we have people come in. We organize all the logistical needs for them, in addition to meetings, workshops, meeting with Israeli organizations, meeting with Palestinian organizations, visiting refugee camps, living with Palestinians, sleeping in their homes, so they could see also the real Palestinians, the ones that they don't hear about in the news, people who have families, who are looking just for taking care of their children and building a future for their families and so on. So anybody can call us and communicate with us, and we could arrange that for them.
Now, we've talked about Israelis demonizing Palestinians and Palestinians demonizing Israelis. Do you think Palestinians are demonized amongst the West?
Well, I think it has been easy to stereotype and to label Palestinians in one particular way, and that has been able to create a lot of excuses and justifications for Israel to continue its occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people, especially the Israeli military and some of the government leaders in Israel. So, yes, part of what we have to do as Palestinians is to recognize that we have been put in this bracket and labeled, for example, as terrorists in the West, and we have to build strategies and do the things, not to say just we are not that, but what are we really as Palestinians. And what we need to show, and we need to make efforts in this, is to show that the greatest majority of Palestinians are Palestinians who are committed to peace, who are committed to justice, who are committed to building their families and living like all other nations in this world, seeking a sense of respect and dignity for their lives and for their future and for their culture. And what we have lacked as Palestinians is in making this message clear to the West and fighting those who are able to push this particular label and demonizing label on the Palestinians in the West.
Now, you have a news network with TV and radio. What is your aim through broadcasting?
Well, our news network is called the Palestine News Network, PNN. In addition to that, we have a television station and a radio station that we started recently. And both the news network and the television and radio stations aim in really fulfilling also the focus that we have of empowering the community. And one thing that we need to be able to allow the Palestinian community to have is a venue to be able to express itself. And expression is not always in what people think of just that political expression against the occupation or what we're going to do or how the occupation is victimizing us and so on, but to really allow for a real discussion to take place within the Palestinian community as to what is happening, what are the facts, and what are the strategies that we could build for positive change. The news network is a website that has news available in 4 languages: Arabic, English, French, and Hebrew. And on a daily basis, we bring all the news that happens on the Palestine News Network website, and we focus in it again on the news that is not usually presented in the Western media, such as news about nonviolence, news about community programs, social events that take place, news that for us puts a human face on the Palestinians, a real face on the Palestinians, and addresses this issue of stereotype of how the Palestinians are labeled in the West.
Do you see any hope for the Middle East?
Well, if I did not have any hope, I will not be here and I will not be doing what I'm doing. I believe in hope. I work for hope. I work on planting hope in the hearts of the Palestinians. And I know that even within those who may seem on both sides as the most extreme and the most hopeless in terms of them understanding what the situation, there is a possibility to communicate and talk to them and make them really understand that peace is possible, that justice is possible in this part of the world. Hope is for me planted in the heart of every human being, respecting the other, understanding the other. But we need to understand also that there's a lot of history that has influenced how people make their decisions now. And many people are truly attached to their history and they only see their future through the lens of their history. So while we recognize a history of injustice, while we recognize a history where terrible things have happened to both people, we need to create a sense where people are able to look at the future and see a better future for themselves and for the next generations. And I believe both communities seek this at the end of the day.
Do you think we can actually achieve peace through non-violence? Because violence seems to push the situation to the top of the news.
Well, I think that nonviolence is not just a powerful tool. I think it's the only way to achieve peace, especially in understanding the specific circumstances where we live in, where violence immediately becomes labeled as the tactic of the other to completely destroy and to plant fear in the hearts of the other. And when that happens, then it becomes easy to justify every act that you do. And again, it fits into the demonizing of the other mentality, where we have to destroy them because they want to destroy us. Nonviolence for me is the only way. It can be formulated into a full-blown strategy. What what we are doing now is engaging in nonviolence on a small tactical level. We do not have at this point what I would call a nonviolence movement in the Palestinian community. So we are engaging in what I call reactionary nonviolence. The wall is being built in an area, we go and demonstrate against it. There are checkpoints, we go and protest there. Roadblocks, we go and remove them. So we are reacting to what the Israeli military is doing to us. For nonviolence to become a movement, it has to be transformed from a reactionary to a proactive movement. And when it becomes a proactive movement that is building and will grow, it's not just engaging in activities, but engaging in a real movement for change, that will open the eyes and the hearts of many Israelis. And I'm not saying this is a theory, because this is really exactly what happened in the first Intifada, in the first uprising in 1987 and 88. It was when Palestinians engaged in mass nonviolent activities, especially the first 2 years of the first Intifada in the late 80s. That was a reason for the peace movement in Israel to say enough of the occupation, and we will no longer allow this occupation to continue. And I feel this is what needs to happen. It needs to happen on a bigger scale. It needs to happen on a more strategic scale. But for me, that is the only solution.
What's your prayer for the Israeli people and the Palestinian people?
Well, my prayer has always been the same prayer, which is for God to allow that human light which exists in every single person to shine, and that God would eliminate and erase the layers of dust and dirt and hatred and fear that have been built up on this light that exists in every single human. When we are able to recognize and just to see the humanity of the other, and to see that we are all God's children and created by God. Every single human is created in God's image. No matter what their religion is, no matter what their color is, what their ethnic group, God created every single human. And my prayer is that we are able to recognize that one day.
So you have a website for anybody who'd like to know more about the organization. What's the address?
The website for Holy Land Trust is www.holylandtrust.org, and for the news network, it's pnn.ps.